Hello, my friends. And today in the US, people are still talking about the idea that only Trump can stop wars in the world, and they are still waiting to see if he will decide to impose sanctions against Russia.
Times call for desperate measures, and I think appropriate sanctions on Russia are far overdue. I mean, I think there's a big appetite for that in Congress, so we're willing to work with the White House.
Overall, nothing has really changed yet. So now let's move on to the situation along the front line, starting with the Dobropillia direction. Since the situation here remains very tense and the Russians continue storming Shahova, Volodymyrivka, and Sofiyivka. In fact, they have once again shifted the situation and are trying to move forward. However, the armed forces of Ukraine continue holding the defense and striking the advancing Russians. So, no new changes here over the past day. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are storming Родинське, Новоекономічне, Миролюбівка, Лисівка, Покровськ, Новопідгороднє, Молодецьке, and are breaking through near Удачне, Котлине, and Звірове. There have been no changes over the past day, but the situation here remains very difficult. Fighters from the Ukrainian forces report that an even bigger battle is expected here soon, that the one that's happening now. On the Pokrovsk axis, things are so-so. South of the city, the Russians have in some places effectively entrenched themselves right near the outskirts. In the Kotlin area, there has been some forward movement. Around Rodinske, there are no significant changes, but that's the toughest sector at the moment. In Novoekonomichne, most of the village was cleared of the Russians, but the situation in the area remains extremely difficult. In Udachne, it's worse. The Russians are present in the village. There are maneuvering battles. A large part of territory is in the gray zone. The whole direction remains the hottest. It feels like a big slaughter is coming soon. And the commander of the 3rd Assault Corps said that strategically the Russians are winning.
I think it's no secret that the situation on the Lyman-Bakhmut-Siversk front is extremely difficult. The strategic picture is even more complicated. I believe the Russians came prepared strategically. They've worked out an offensive infiltration tactic for their infantry, using small groups, sometimes only 1 or 2 infantrymen up to 5 or 6, operating at great depth, and they coordinated those actions with drones. That gives them certain advantages on the battlefield. Now the ball is in our court. I would say that the biggest shortfall has always been a lack of strategy. Let me give a simple example. Ukraine dominated in innovative areas in 2022 to 2024. Ukraine was the first to build a system of comprehensive surveillance using reconnaissance drones. All of that was created largely from the bottom-up, grassroots initiatives that then gained traction. We were very proud of that in the media, but we didn't pay enough attention to scaling it. As a result, in 2025 the Russians, as they often do, followed in our footsteps. In terms of the number of FPV drones used, they surpass Ukraine. But because those key things weren't defined strategically, we lost that advantage. So resources are critically important, but first and foremost it matters how effectively you use those resources. The takeaway is this: I think financial support is always necessary for any country and certainly for Ukraine, and we need help, funding, and support, but we also need a clear strategy.
In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians are pushing toward the city across the fields, while also storming Dachne, Filia, Ivanivka, Alexandrograd, and advancing near Voskresenka. So far, there have been no changes over the past day, but the activity is very high and there is a serious threat of new breakthroughs. Meanwhile, in the Pokrovsk direction, a breakthrough already took place yesterday. The Russians managed to push toward significantly and partially captured Ternove and Novomykolаivka. However, Ukrainian fighters report that they have in fact pulled back from the village and the fighting is now for Kalinivske. We're still waiting for official statements on this, but the situation is indeed very bad. In addition, attacks on Novoivanivka continue and the situation there remains catastrophic. In the Huliaipole direction, the Russians are storming Olhivske and Poltavka. Activity has increased, but so far they haven't managed to advance further, and the front line hasn't changed over the past day. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians haven't launched new assaults yet. However, shelling of Primorsk continues, and it looks like they are planning a breakthrough in this direction as fire activity has intensified. At the same time, the armed forces of Ukraine released a video showing Russians being destroyed on the outskirts of Stepnohirsk, which in fact confirms that in recent days the Russians did manage to break into the settlement and even entrench themselves. This is why geolocation maps confirm a Russian advance of about 2 kilometers. Still, there is hope that Ukrainian forces eliminated them, since no official statement about Russian breakthrough here has been made. So we are waiting for new information. In the Kherson direction, and the Russians are attempting breakthroughs near the Antonivsky Bridge. They also heavily shelling the right bank with a massive number of drones operating there. Artillery and FAB strikes continue as well, but just like before, they haven't managed to cross to the right bank, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kostiantynivka direction, the Russians keep attacking near Bilagora, storming Pleshiivka and pushing around Katerynivka, Rusin Yar, and Poltavka. However, over the past day, there have been no changes as all attacks have been successfully repelled. In the Sieversk direction, the Russians continue attacks on Yampolivka, storm Dronivka, and Serebryanka, and are breaking through near Grigorivka. The situation here is very difficult due to the heavy shelling and constant attacks, but so far they haven't advanced further, and the front line remains unchanged over the past day. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are striking the Russian rear, and it's reported that in Severodonetsk area of Luhansk region, an unmanned aerial vehicle strike may hit another Russian ammunition depot. Once I lived in Severodonetsk. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are storming Dvorichna, Stavky, Shandrigolove, and breaking through near Kolodyazi and Olhivka. And this situation here is critical as the Russians have reached the last defensive lines, Zarichne and Stavky. If they advance further, they will reach the outskirts of Lyman, which is their main objective in this sector. In the Borova direction, the Russians are storming Novopavlivka, but so far there have been no major changes. The Ukrainian forces continue successfully repelling all attacks. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are attacking the outskirts of Kupiansk. They also push on toward Myrne, with fighting ongoing in Petropavlivka and advancing near Stepova-Novoselivka. However, despite Russian claims of capturing the city, there have been no changes along the front line here, and Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Dvorichna direction, the Russians are attempting breakthroughs near Figolivka, but they have made no progress, and the situation hasn't changed over the past day. In the Velykyi Burluk direction, the Russians are pushing toward Khatny, storming Ambarne and Odradne, but over the past day there have been no changes, and Ukrainian forces are still managing to hold the defense. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are not launching any new assaults, and all their previous attempts have been unsuccessful. In Vovchansk, the Russians continue attacks, but they haven't made any advances, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Sumy direction, the Russians continue attacks near Andriivka, are pushing toward Varachine, near Yunakivka, and across the border. So far, Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all attacks, and there have been no changes over the past day. The Russians also claim that they carried out a powerful attack on Chernihiv region. So far, we're waiting for official information from the Ukrainian side. Meanwhile, the Russians are showing how they transport cargo to 100 on carts.
Here, thank you to our friends from Yakutia. They brought this Yakut cart. Now it's easy and simple. No need to carry it by hand. You can just roll it. It works well even on forest paths. We needed a lot of things, because carrying them by hand is very heavy, 8 to 10 kilometers. Thank you very much.
Friends, what do you think about this method of transport? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Meanwhile, Senator Graham stated that Europe, not the US, should be the one putting pressure on Russia.
Europe to get behind President Trump to punish Putin's customers. Putin has been sanctioned, literally his economy has been sanctioned every way it can be sanctioned. President Trump approach is to go after China and India. President Trump put a 25% tariff on every Indian product coming into America because they buy cheap Russian oil. He is now going after China. He posted yesterday to our European allies, mostly NATO allies, that he expects them to follow his lead by imposing tariffs on China for 50 to 100%, up to 100% on products coming into Europe. It is now time for Europe to get behind the Trump approach. The Europeans say they love the Graham bill. Graham Blumenthal bill is 85 co-sponsors in the Senate that will allow President Trump to tariff people who buy cheap Russian oil and for their benefit, like China, India, Brazil. It is now time for the Europeans to follow President Trump's lead and go after China and India. China and India will change their practices toward Putin. This war would end.
All right. Well, Senator, you introduced that sanctions bill against Russia 6 months ago.
Yeah.
You have 85 people on board. Why issue an ultimatum to Europe and not Putin? Why not move forward with that bill now? And are you planning
to? Putin doesn't care about sanctions. No sanctions have worked here. He evades sanctions. He lives well.
Are you going to push your bill forward, though? Are you going to get your bill on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Overall, nothing has changed, and even strong sanctions have still not been implemented. The US, like Putin, is trying to buy time and retreating from its promises. Meanwhile, Trump's spiritual advisor stated that we are on the brink of World War III. We are standing on the edge of World War III. Before our eyes, a new axis of evil is forming. China, India, North Korea, and the Russians have joined forces, said Trump's spiritual advisor, Burns. At the same time, while European countries say they lack air defense systems for a possible war against Russia, China is reportedly using its air defense to intercept meteorites. A reported intercept of a meteorite by China's missile defense system in Shandong province. It's hard to imagine how many air defense systems China could produce in case of the war, as they're developing very rapidly. And that's all from me. So please, as usual, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.